Welcome to MT Mentor, where we fill our cups and share our wisdom together. I am your host, Jennifer Hicks, and I am a board-certified music therapist and licensed educator with over 20 years of experience as a clinician, educator, supervisor, and mentor. You can learn more about me and our MT Mentor podcast and membership group on my website at www.joyfulnoisesllc.com. You can click on the link at the bottom of the homepage to receive a free infographic and periodic updates, including previews of upcoming podcast guests and episodes. It is an honor to welcome our guest mentor today, Dr. Alicia Ann Clair. Alicia Ann Clair, Ph.D., MTBC, is a professor emeritus at the University of Kansas School of Music, Lawrence, where she has a long history of clinical research, teaching, and service. Dr. Clair is also a past president of the American Music Therapy Association, AMTA, and has served on its board of directors. Welcome, Alicia.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here with you today.
Thank you. Let's begin by just giving you an opportunity to share with our listeners a little bit about your own music therapy journey and how have you seen this profession evolve over the years?
Oh my, that could take a very long time. I'll try to keep the journey short because for me it was completely serendipitous. I was on my way to enroll in school in my freshman year at the University of Kansas with the full intention of becoming a nurse because I was very interested in the medical field. And I had my mother in the back seat while I was driving, my dad and I in the front, and she's saying very clearly and carefully, there's this new degree program called music therapy, and it would be really interesting if you would check it out because it really puts music with nursing. And I would really hate for all those years of piano lessons to go to waste. And the next day I enrolled in music therapy. And I never
Wow.
And what was so crazy about it was that it was fairly new then, and it was not that well known. So as I entered the program, I was a student of Dr. E. Thayer Gaston, who didn't really teach the freshmen. He didn't really bother with us so much, but stuck with it. And on the last day of class, he turned to the 12 of us and said, if you think you're going to leave here and get a job, you're badly mistaken because there aren't any. So that was very traumatic for all of us. And through that process, I was really angry. And at that time, I thought, well, this really probably shouldn't be that I'm angry with my professor, but I'm very angry because it took a lot of sacrifice to send me to school, and it took a lot of my work to get through. And then he's telling me that I wasted my time and my effort and my resources. Mm-hmm. So that's not the only thing he did to me. 6 weeks before I was supposed to start internship, he called me into his office and he said, I know you're thinking about going to Parsons State Hospital and Training Center, which is south of Lawrence, but I don't think that's a good idea. So I'm sending you to Stockton State Hospital in Stockton, California, and I've talked to Dr. Crothers, who heads up the hospital, and you're to report there July 1st. And
oh my goodness.
I went. He wasn't the kind of person that you would say, well, why? And that's really far, and it's really intimidating. And there was none of that opportunity. There was no support. I just went. I finished the internship, and I established my first job about a month later at the San Joaquin County Association for Retarded Citizens. That's what it was called then. And of course, we know the nomenclature has changed markedly through the years. I worked that job for several months. They came back for my master's degree at KU. Went to St. Louis following a husband there and who was going to school, and I established 2 more music therapy positions. And by this time, I figured I had the drill down. So I really... Oh, and I left out establishing one at the Menninger Foundation Children's Division when I did my advanced practicum for
Wow.
my master's degree. So I established 5 jobs, 6 jobs for music therapists who followed
Mhm.
after me. And the interesting thing about that was there were no jobs, but I
Mhm.
was working. And
Yes.
so when I came to KU to teach, following those clinical experiences, I was all about saying to students, you won't see them advertised in the newspaper, but they're there, and I'm going to show you how to do it. So
Mm.
a lot of them did that, and a lot of them went into positions that were already established. And now there's more demand than we can even begin to muster. So that's kind of the way that all started.
Wow. Thank you. I think that perspective is so important for students today, for professionals today, to remember the history and how
Mhm.
far we have come. We still have places to go and hopes and dreams for the future, and we have come a long way too. So, what are your hopes and dreams for how our profession will continue to evolve in the future?
Well, I knew many of the pioneers.
Mm-hmm.
I was in the field so early that I knew Ruth Boxberger, and I knew Richard Graham, and I knew Bob Unkefer
Mm-hmm.
and Irv Schneider. I knew all of those people, and they were extremely collegial. And what they laid down as a trajectory was to do the cutting edge research to establish the knowledge and to document the knowledge that we were actually producing as we learned more through practice.
Yes.
So that trajectory has been there since the beginning. And the Journal of Music Therapy started very early. I think it was 1964 is when it began. I may be wrong about that, but it was very early.
Around that time,
And
yes.
consequently, all of that was in place. Now, what do I see for the future? Or what I would like to see for the future is for that to continue, and it really has. I mean, our journal is cutting edge. Oxford University Press is really thrilled with it,
Mm-hmm.
and they're thrilled with us and what we are wanting to do. When we were looking for a new publishing company several years ago, I spoke with one of the people who would come to the board meetings, and informally she said, we've been trying to get Music Therapy Journal in our collection for a very long time, and we're just thrilled to be
Mm.
here. So that was a very good marriage. The situation that I would like to see us do, though, is to knock down the silos,
Mm.
because
Yes.
professions tend to get them,
Mm-hmm.
not just music therapy. You know, you have this one group of people over here and they have a certain philosophy, and then there is another group over here, and then the people in the silos don't communicate very well. So
Mm-hmm.
I would really think that it would be advisable to knock those down. They're sometimes very well established and set very firmly, and people do not want to lose them because they're important to them. But
Mm-hmm.
if we could create information hubs that integrate the brightest and the best together, and that there's
Mm-hmm.
always new blood coming, and
Yeah.
that those who have been there for a while move on and do other things, but never lose track of mentoring, never
Mm.
lose track of encouraging younger practitioners and students, and always remember where they came from, and do what
Yes.
they do with humility and grace and all of the intelligence that they possess.
Thank you, Alicia. Beautifully said. And hopefully that will inspire us to make those efforts to connect among the silos and to reach out and encourage. You have certainly encouraged me. For those who are listening, I will never forget the moment a few years ago at a music therapy conference when Alicia encouraged me to step into more of a leadership role. And that meant a lot to me, probably more than you will ever know. And so I would love for you to share with the listeners what you want us to know, other professionals and students, about the role of service in our profession. And also, if you want to add some about that importance of encouraging each other in service to the profession too.
Well, we are a service profession. That's what we are. We live and breathe as service providers.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone who is in our profession must have a servant's heart. and most do.
Mhm.
Some perhaps don't. But with a servant's heart, the importance is to bring better life quality to those who can benefit from music. And so when you read through our mission statement, and to always keep that first and foremost, is to provide services to the people who need them and to their
Yes.
families, and to make accessible the opportunity to have music therapy. And so that's a very frightening and terribly challenging statement, simply because we could end up with more demand than we can supply.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting is that there is so much, I think, so much pressure on us, because there are other professionals and non-professionals who are claiming to be music therapists, who are claiming to have credentials, and they don't, and who are really competitors in the business realm. And so I think we have to work very hard to get students through the pipeline of education and training and out in the field, not with the understanding that their education has ended, because it certainly won't have. It's just begun.
Yes.
And for us to really understand how to bring these competitors under our wing and make them our assistants, and make them our colleagues, and make them our opportunity to bring more services. There are a lot of things that people can be trained to do that they might not need to be a music therapist to do.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. Well, as I just said, you have certainly been a mentor for me. Who played the role of mentor in your life? Starting out, throughout your career? Yes.
I have to tell, Jennifer and I talked briefly before we came online. I did not have a mentor in my professional life, and I tried to find them. I invited people to be my mentor, and they were not interested, and they kind of let me know that in fairly subtle ways. I had opportunities that opened, and it's like I've always said, windows of opportunity will open. You just have to have some, I'm going to say, chutzpah to go through them, because sometimes they can scare you pretty badly. But I did have a life mentor. And a life mentor happened to be in a really kind of tragic part of my life, in that I was divorced. My husband decided that he didn't want to be married anymore. And so I was served with papers on my front step one day. This is a very ugly experience, and I was traumatized because that was not the way I had foreseen my future. So I did the responsible things. I went to a counselor for several months, and I identified where the problems were. And I'm going to say here that there is never a pancake so flat that it doesn't have two sides. So I figured out my side of it, and really made some decisions about some changes I wanted to make. I still had a lot of hurt, and I still had a lot of woundedness. And I knew that what I needed to find was somebody who could help me through the spiritual part of dealing with life. And I checked around a little bit, and this is the kind of thing, it's like looking for a counselor. You need to be very careful, because they're not all created equal.
Absolutely.
And some of them are good, and some of them are very bad. So I found Sister Connie Kristalik, and I showed up on her doorstep one day after we had made a phone conversation appointment. And she handed me a pamphlet, and she said, "That pamphlet says that I'm not here to provide therapy." And I said, "Well, that's good, because I've done a lot of that, and I'm frankly to the point that it's really not helping anymore. I need to learn how I'm going to heal this broken heart, or how I'm going to end up with a healed broken heart." And she said, "Okay." So we started in, and that was 35 years ago. I have to say, it's been a very, very long time. But what I learned from her was just nudgings to figure out a lot of things on my own. But what I really learned was that life happens and there always hurts and wounds, but forgiveness is the way out.
Mm.
And it's an act of discipline and it's an act of will. And you will say, I don't feel like forgiving. Well, of course not. I did it screaming into my mattress in my apartment because I didn't want anybody to hear me and call the police.
Yeah.
And I literally screamed into my mattress, I forgive. So just to drop that to people, young people in particular,
yeah,
I think is important. So the whole discovery of that and the higher power and how I don't have to do everything on my own and I have help. And I'm not talking about religion here. I am talking about a spirituality that every person has the option to develop. Or not.
Thank you so much for sharing that journey with us, for sharing a little bit of that, those wounds and the healing with us. I think that's so important as mentors to share with other students and professionals, to know that each one of us as human beings have faced so many challenges throughout our lives. And we never know when we meet somebody what they are going through or what they have been through.
That's right.
Yeah, so being able to listen and witness your story is really an honor today. Thank you for that.
Well, you're welcome. I thought about this quite a bit about whether or not a personal disclosure would be appropriate, but I really couldn't figure out another way to get to the topic and the substance. So I think that that's important.
Absolutely. And it leads us actually into this next question, which, how has one of the challenges that you faced in your life or a perceived failure in your life set you up for later success?
Okay, so I'm really glad I told the story about Sister Connie, because I really began to understand that nothing is a failure. Everything we experience leads us to the next part and equips us for the next part. For instance, I thought divorce was absolutely the worst thing that could happen to me. And I'm going to tell you, it was one of the best. Once the healing's done, and if you sense that you've had a failure, I really think that it's important to look at that as barriers and ways in which you are being driven, or you think you're being driven and you can't get there. And very often that's a matter of timing. For instance, at one point, I was real interested in medical music therapy. It wasn't the thing. I couldn't find a toehold into it. Now it's all over the place. I'm kind of jealous because I didn't get to work with it. I did work as a consultant at the VA Medical Center, though, and I worked with a lot of elderly people. And dementia was one part of that. And interestingly enough, that was hot. So the timing was hot for dementia, and I wrote a lot about it. And then that has kind of gone out of the wayside, and then it became physical rehab and older adults. And so what the point is here is that my career has changed a lot over the years because I have a lot of diverse interests to begin with. And the whole thing about it is that if I tried one way and it wouldn't work, I just shifted gears and went another way. Sometimes I got back to it. Sometimes I didn't. But what I got was just a huge high every time I went to work. Because there's nothing more exciting than having an experience with a client and they have a success or they cross a hurdle and you know that it was because of the plan you made and the implementation of the service you gave that happened. And there's no better, freakier high in the world than that.
I would have to agree with you. I was speaking to some students earlier this week and just saying, I still get goosebumps.
Oh, yeah.
I am still in awe of the power of music therapy. And so it's exciting to hear that you are too.
Well, and I bring this back with people who are not trained and people who are inexperienced. You said the power of music therapy. begins with the power of music, and
Mm-hmm.
it is powerful, and it can be detrimental. And what we have
Yeah.
not done adequately has been to show that. Everybody
Mm-hmm.
assumes you can listen to music and you'll heal, and these people say things like that. I've heard them.
Yes.
And what I'm sitting there thinking is, oh my gosh, how can you do what you just described that you did, because it's irresponsible. It went
Mm-hmm.
well, but it could have certainly gone the other direction.
Absolutely. It's something that we talk a lot, and I work with adults with mental health and substance use disorders. And so music can absolutely be a source of harm. I work a lot with
Okay.
people who've experienced trauma in their lives, with veterans, uh, with a variety of populations. And it is one of the pieces that we come back to again and again, is not only for me to understand that, but also in some of the education that I do for some of the clients that I get to work with, so that they can better understand too their own use of music in their lives and being aware of how it can cause harm.
Yes. And so it's so fabulous that you do that. And it's so important that we learn better ways to communicate that, and maybe better ways to train music therapists with it, so
Mm-hmm.
that they can be articulate as well as responsible clinically. And I think a lot of people operate on their sense, because music therapists are all the time. It's not that you get a feeling so much, but you see so much, because you understand what you're seeing is translating into somebody's reaction.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it can be very important for us to then make a change in what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's as simple as a musical selection.
Yeah.
So it's all of that is rather subtle, but
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Being able to adapt and change based on all of that we're constantly assessing
that's
is
right.
so important. What is a change that you've made in your life, either a new or a changed belief or habit that has improved your life?
I've thought about this a lot. Um, and I have to say, probably the most important was when my mother called me one day and she says, "Well, I have high blood pressure." And I said, "Oh dear." And she said, "So here's what you have to do.
Yes.
But here's what you have to do." She said, "You need to get yourself exercising." She said, "I bought myself a pair of Adidas."
Ah.
And she, because that's what the box said, okay? She bought herself a pair of Adidas, all right, and she started walking. So she wanted me to get some, and I started walking, and that was a very long time ago. And so I've always been a regular exerciser ever since then. I never did have high blood pressure, but I could have had other things. So if you can't get to a gym, which I can't right now, and it's a
Mm-hmm.
little bit disturbing, um, figure out how to use YouTube in your basement and get yourself going. And
Yes.
and for those women, lift weights,
Mm-hmm.
because we have to keep bone density, and the way to do that is not weight bearing exercise, because it's not enough. I found out. Lift weights.
Mm-hmm.
You won't turn into Mr. Atlas if you do that, but you'll be healthier and your bones will be healthier. So that's one of the parts. Nutrition has always been a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really drink. I like to have a glass of wine once in a while, but if I do, I just get loaded. So it's not really much fun. So I don't drink. I used to smoke. I started when I was 6. I quit when I was 21. So, I have a long history, but I haven't smoked since then.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very careful about what I eat. I do not eat sugar, and I don't eat processed foods. So it's all whole foods. And I think that that's real important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So those are the things. It's diet, nutrition. And then if you do that, that goes a long way toward managing stress. Really, it
Mm-hmm.
does. If you're
It
eating
does.
right, you'll feel better.
Yeah.
And then I sleep as much as I can, which is, I'm a pretty good sleeper. So all those things are really important. And I've just done them for a long time, and I just continue to. It's not been an earth-shaking thing. Um, But it's an interesting thing to watch with the people, women mostly, who I've seen who have gotten quite elderly. They can either be in a wheelchair or still out there with a round point shovel jumping on it in the garden. It just
Yeah.
depends on what they've done for a number of years. And
Mm-hmm.
women need to start very, very early, because the whole thing about bone density and all those things really begin early.
Yes, absolutely. I present quite a bit on burnout and self-care.
Oh
And
boy.
it's interesting because those physiological practices,
Mm-hmm.
exercise, diet, sleep, are huge in not only longevity in life, but also longevity in our profession and preventing burnout. It's those physiological practices and self-awareness are the top two things that make a difference. So,
Well, interesting that you brought that up. You know, the whole thing about being self-aware is that I'm not happy doing what I'm doing, and but I just have done it for a long time, but the whole thing about our profession is all you need to do is switch clientele, and it's like a miracle happened. You just
it's a
totally,
whole different profession.
you're excited again, and you're reading new literature. And the whole thing about it is,
Mm-hmm.
we read the music therapy literature, and I noticed there's something in here about books, and I don't really know how to answer that. But anyway,
That's okay.
you read in the discipline in which you're practicing, but you
Mm-hmm.
read not only the music therapy literature, but you read the
Yes.
non-music literature. That's so critical. What are the components of Parkinson's disease? What is that disease like? What is that about, and how is it treated? What
Mm-hmm.
is the gold standard for what's done? And then plug yourself in and go with it. Make the
Mm-hmm.
translation and use music therapy to facilitate that outcome.
Yes. Well, music therapy literature counts for this question. So feel free to continue on that if you would like. When you think about the books and the music that have most influenced you throughout your life, Alicia, or music therapy literature, what comes to mind for you?
Well, it popped into my head last night. The book Music and Therapy, for the first two chapters. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I used those until I quit teaching, which was, well, it was in 2013, so it's been a little while back. And of course, the book's been out of print for years. It was first in print in 1968. And I had read the galley proofs to it in class with Gaston. He was the editor. But it was that framework that Bill Sears provided in chapter 2 that helped me as I began to talk about our field, because
Mm-hmm.
I would go into established jobs, and you had to be able to figure out ways to explain in a very methodical and a theoretical way what was going to happen as a result of being hired. And I could say, in psychiatry, and I worked psychiatry several times, internship was a big time, and then I worked child psychiatry later. It was just a matter of, with the team reports I used to sit through, where they would say, well, the patient got better, or the student got better. Well, there was no indication of what or when, and there would be this thing, well, we haven't seen any changes in months. And I would sit there and say, well, in music therapy, the very first time I met with this person, I had outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
I had something to describe. I had something objectified. I could even measure it through a description.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result of that, that was pretty impressive,
Mm-hmm.
because, and this, I don't know what you think about this, Jennifer, but I would see the pathology translated through the music. And as I changed the musical behaviors, the integrated personal behaviors also changed.
Mm-hmm.
Impulse control, for instance, which is really a cognitive process. And it doesn't happen until people have some maturity, even as a child. But one of the things that was the most difficult was the impulse control in the adolescents I was treating. Well, they were old enough to have the forebrain going on, but they were never challenged to stop the acting out and go productive with their behaviors. But they would do it to play guitar.
Mm-hmm.
And they would do it to be in my combo. And they would do it to be in the school musical.
Mm-hmm.
Those things used to give me
Mm-hmm.
migraines, though, I have to tell you. And you have to have a lot of cooperation. But
Yes.
the kids would change
Mm-hmm.
so they could be in it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was worth it.
Yeah.
So, that's just kind of a primitive description of some of the things that were happening. And I would talk about the behaviors. And I would actually, with the children, I got them to start charting appropriate behaviors in the class.
Yeah.
So I would run through an application design, and at the end of it, I might have 5 children there.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, okay, Ronnie, do you think you had a 5 out of 5 or a 4 out of 5 or a 3 out of 5 or what? And I would ask him to rate his behavior, and he would tell me. And if he said 5 out of 5 and I said, no, I don't agree. I saw you reach over and pinch Mary. Now, that's not appropriate. You can't do that and be appropriate. So, no, you get a 4. And so we would do 5 of these in a 20-minute session. And then we would graph them, and I would take those graphs and roll them out at the team meetings. This sounds crazy now, but
Yeah.
Therapists were challenged to do something and they never did anything. So I did this thing on my own. And so the psychiatrist would look at it and he'd go, wow, I can see change happening here over the last 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And the kids did too.
Mm-hmm.
And I gave them no other reward. All they got was a plot on a graph. And they would come in and they'd say, hey, can I see my chart? And all they wanted to do was to demonstrate that they could pull themselves together, and they did it for music.
Mm-hmm.
It's extremely powerful.
It is. Yeah. And I have that text. If you watch this video and you see me looking behind me, my Gaston book is in the other office. So I looked just quick to see if it was with my music therapy books, but it's on that shelf. It's not one I must admit that I reference as often as some of these.
You probably don't. But
I do have it.
I'm the only person around who even mentions it. However, I have heard other people like Ken Brusha say, we need to update that and put it together again. And I think Ken Brusha is one of the smartest people who ever drew breath. I think he's amazing. He's just brilliant in every way. So if he says so, then
absolutely. How about music? We were talking about how powerful music can be. What is the music that has influenced your life?
Well, all of it, really. What I would tell you is that there have been certain parts of my life where I couldn't listen to certain music. With that divorce thing, the only thing that I didn't cry to was Baroque classical. And I listened to exclusively Baroque classical music probably for about a year, somewhere between 6 months and a year before I could listen to anything else, because all the pop music was hooked somehow to that relationship that had died, and it had been hooked to the dreams that had died. And so it just made me so terribly sad. I couldn't tolerate it.
Yeah.
I've always loved rhythm and blues, to the point that my husband just laughs at me. He said, how did somebody who grew up in a farm in the middle of Kansas love rhythm and blues? I said, well, we had radios and I heard her. That's where it started, and Ray Charles. And so I have to tell you that I love it all. I mean, and I think that rhythm and blues is a huge tool for music therapists because it fits all age groups, and it can be easily used for lyric interpretation. It also can be used for songwriting techniques and a lot of other things. And so it's a very simple kind of thing to be able to play. And I did a lot of rhythm and blues and rock and roll with the kids who wanted to play guitar. So now I'm playing piano again because my mother left me hers, and it's a nice little grand, and it has to be more than just a piece of furniture. So, and I'm just playing things that I learned in college, and frankly, some of that stuff's pretty difficult. So I'm practicing somewhere around a half hour to an hour a day, which is a little bit ridiculous, but it's good for brain training and it's good for hands and it's good for lots of things. So it's a good thing to make music. I used to do a lot of guitar playing and a lot of folk singing, and that was back in the long gown days, you know, with the long hair and the octagonal glasses and all that stuff. I have to tell you a funny story. I was doing a wedding one time and there were sweat beads in the ground and I didn't see them, and I happened to camp myself with this long dress right over the sweat beads.
Oh no.
During the wedding.
Oh no.
Anyway, you can take it from there. It was pretty interesting. I kind of had a problem for a little while.
Since we're talking about music, I'm going to skip ahead to this question, then we'll come back. If you had a theme song, Alicia, what would it be?
Oh, it'd have to be I Did It My Way. It'd have to be. Because there wasn't anybody to tell me how. And there wasn't anybody to even give me feedback.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a lot of times, when I was an intern at that psych hospital, the woman who was my supervisor decided I was doing so well that she sent me off to a building to start a new program on my own.
Wow.
And she never ever showed up. I mean, I went in and introduced myself to the staff and said, I'm here to do music therapy programming, and I'd like to visit with you about what you think might be good. And I have some ideas, but I really would like your input. And I really want to talk with your patients, because that's what they were. They were in a medical facility at that time. So I worked pretty much on my own. She gave me a B+ for my internship grade. And I asked her, I was doing all these sessions by myself, not only in that building, but all over the hospital and trekking all over. And she said, well, you really need to wear eyeshadow.
Oh my goodness. Oh no.
Can you imagine?
No.
The only thing she could say to me was that I needed to wear eyeshadow.
Oh.
And I looked at her, I about fell out of the chair. I was stupefied.
Yeah.
So I said to her, is that all? She said, well, I know Ether Gaston is very tough. He's a very difficult taskmaster. And he would expect me to be very hard on you, so you get a B+. Oh. So that was not a very good mentor.
No.
I really think, so here's the thing that people have to keep in mind. When you're really, really competent, you scare people. Mm-hmm. I kind of naturally scare people anyway. My husband tells me all the time. And I think it's because there's a certain amount of insecurity in the world. Mm-hmm. And I have this idea that insecurity is one of the most evil things that ever was, because it can cause so much turmoil and so much hurt and so much derailing of somebody's ego or their confidence. And so I think I made that because I did co-therapy with that internship director, and I held up my end of it. I mean, I was co-therapist with her. Besides the other stuff she had me doing, she gave me some of the hardest patients. They've been in the hospital for years. I mean, that's the way it used to be in the psych.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I interned in a state hospital.
Oh, yeah. So you know.
I know.
I had patients who'd been in the hospital 35 years, 40 years.
Yes.
Some of them had had lobotomies, and they didn't have enough judgment to make it on the outside.
Yeah.
It was pretty tragic what went on. Well, I think I made her insecure. I did everything I could to not do that, but I can't control how people interpret me. And my personality is undoubtedly coming across in this interview, and so people can understand. I mean, I'm a fairly straight shooter, but I've got a little bit of sense to not make people feel bad on purpose. I mean, I would never do that. And as really downplayed as I can be, I still rock the people who maybe have a reason to feel like they don't measure up. But I mean, she was fine. If she'd have given me a chance, I would have told her all the great things that I learned from her and all the great things that I appreciated that she taught me, and all the things that I would not want to do because of what she taught me. I wouldn't have told her.
We learn both.
Oh, yes, we do.
Having worked a lot with students, I always tell them some of what you'll learn from me is what you want to do, and some of what you'll learn is what you don't want to do in your work. And that's both are really important.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So what advice would you give to students who are studying music therapy right now, Alicia, and who may be going through internship situations, hopefully not like that one, but
Or at least wear eyeshadow. Just start out that way. Might keep you out of trouble. I don't know. Let's see. I thought about this for a little bit, and I made a few notes here. What would I advise you to do? That's the question, right? What would you?
Yeah.
Okay, for the first thing I would advise you to do is to befriend an older person. I invite everybody to do this. I have done this over the years, and it is astoundingly helpful. Older people are wise people. Older people will keep relatively quiet unless you ask them questions, and then they will bare their hearts to you. And the thing is that you can bare your hearts to them. And there's not one thing that you can say that will surprise them or shock them or make them judge you. They just won't if they're a decent person. I really started doing this with my mother. I didn't realize it until yesterday when I was thinking about this. Well, I started with Mom, and then I had this little lady I used to drive to church. Then I got another little lady after she died, another little lady to drive to church, and she died. And then I've got this wonderful, wonderful woman who is 20 years older than I, and she just died. So she was my soulmate, I swear she was. And we had many wonderful times together. And as she got sick, I was with her. Got her into hospice and visited her there. She didn't really have family. So I'm sort of looking around, and I don't have my next one yet.
So now, if you're listening,
here's the problem, Jennifer. I've been looking for older ladies, and it dawned on me that I have become one. So to find someone older than I am is going to start getting trickier and trickier. So I might have to open up to somebody younger than me, somebody younger than I am, and we'll see how that goes. Anyway, point is made. Yes. And the other things about this is to not let yourself feel insecure. Understand what your strengths are. Understand that every one of us has limitations because there are places we haven't been yet, and there are things we haven't tried yet. So really take an inventory of your strengths. Also take a very careful inventory of your gifts. And understand that each of you have different ones. Understand that each of you has a separate path to walk, and avoid competition with one another at all costs. You might do some self-comparisons, but that I've never seen that come up with anything except detrimental experience. Yes. It's really that idea, be motivated by doing your best, not that you did better than Donna, because Donna may not be a very good music therapist, and because you're just barely better than Donna, you're not very good either. So understand your gifts, excel where you possibly can, be humble. Always. Humility is really critically important. If people compliment you, be gracious about it. Don't do what you do because you're looking for that. Yes. Don't do what you do because you're looking for power over somebody, but use the power you've been given to help people. Now, let's see. I think I covered everything. Oh, be authentic. Be authentic. And if you have friends that are not life-giving, prune them. You will save yourself a lot of
the wisdom.
Well, I did this, and I didn't do it very well. The story goes, let's see, do we have time for this story? Yeah, we do. I had a girlfriend, a college girlfriend, who I always felt kind of bad when I'd spent time with her. And I finally, I got served with divorce papers, and I went over to Kansas City to see her, and I was in pieces. And I said, I just feel so destroyed. I
Mm.
just really needed to come and visit with you. And she said, I couldn't believe you married that guy in the first place. That was just really stupid. And,
Oh,
you know, he was coming over here and visiting me when you guys were in Kansas City. And she never told me. And she said, and before you were married, he was fooling
oh,
around. And she never told me. And she
oh,
knew these things. So she wasn't truthful with me. And I was almost in a bushel basket, and this did
oh,
not help. And I thought,
no.
a friend would have put her arms around me and said, I am so sorry this happened to you.
Mm-hmm.
And she probably would have done it before, a long time ago. And I might have been angry, but she would have loved me enough to take the risk.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So one day she called me about 5 in the morning, and I was sound asleep. And the phone rang, and I picked it up because I thought, oh my gosh, you know, it scared me to death, but I'm still
Mm-hmm.
asleep. And she said, I want to know why I haven't heard from you in weeks and weeks and weeks, and why you haven't been over to see me, and why we haven't done this and that. And I said point blank, which was the truth, I made a list of my friends and you're not on it. Which was a horrible thing to say to her, but I wasn't in my right mind. So I take that as
Mm-hmm.
maybe that was a gift because I was
Yeah.
needing to break away and I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't figure out how I was going to do it.
Yeah.
Because, you know, as music therapists, we're very nice
Mm-hmm.
and we're just the best caregivers there ever was. But we have
Mm-hmm.
to be cognizant of the fact that that caregiving can be destructive if we
Mm-hmm.
don't manage it. So we have to put
Yeah.
boundaries up. And I was not good
Yes.
at boundaries, and I learned to be.
Mm-hmm.
But that experience, I really share with the spirit of how it's so important that if
Yeah.
someone is not life-giving to you, you need to not spend time with it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just wrong for you
Yeah.
to do that.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you.
And she didn't let that lie. I mean, she she kept calling, and I kept not answering, which was, you know, wasn't going to change my mind. Finally, she had her son email me. He said, I don't know what happened between you and mom, but would you please fix it? She's driving me crazy. And I wrote him back and I said, you know, it's between the two of us. Thank you for
Mm-hmm.
being concerned.
Yeah.
And that was that. Now, I have a couple more notes here. I need to, my writing is so little.
So is mine, actually.
This isn't good to have little writing. Well, I think probably the most of it's been here. I think the importance to young people is to be very careful about taking advice. If
Mm-hmm.
anybody says to you, you should, if they say
Mm-hmm.
anything about you should, you probably shouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
So that business about really being in touch with yourself, you will know what advice to follow.
Yeah.
Because if it gives you a thread that engages with what you've been thinking or feeling or helps you get clarification in any way, if somehow it's an opportunity,
Mm-hmm.
and so many things are, even if they seem like the worst thing in the world, they're an opportunity for the
Mm-hmm.
next part. Follow that advice. It's really hard to
Mm-hmm.
discriminate, but you have to do it yourself, and there's a risk
Mm-hmm.
if you don't take it, and there's a risk if you do. So there's no easy way through that.
No.
I think get quiet, don't do anything right away, maybe give it a sleep before
Mm-hmm.
you have to make a decision. I learned that if you can just sleep on it one night, it helps a lot.
It does. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you. So you've already given us a couple of pieces of advice to maybe ignore, the shoulds and potentially the eyeshadow advice. Any other advice, because we know music therapy students get a lot of it, that they should ignore?
Well, I think if it doesn't fit with your self-assessment. I mean, if it's
Mm.
if it's antagonistic,
Mm-hmm.
definitely don't follow it. And what I have here written is that you identify your talents and you develop your talents. The best advice I can give is to be the best musician you can, because there's a high correlation between fine musicianship and success as a music therapist. And if you're barely getting through your functional skills tests, you need to do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
Big time. Because you can't play guitar and try to figure out the fingerings while you're walking backwards down the hall playing rhythmic swing for somebody who has a stroke.
Mm-hmm.
That just won't work.
Yeah.
So find your talent, assimilate knowledge. And the whole thing is, don't just memorize it. Think about it, use it. And I think my best lessons in clinic, my clinical practice got better because every time I did a session, I sat and thought about it.
Mm. Yes.
I did not miss an opportunity to reflect. You
Mm-hmm.
must reflect, and you must admit where the shortcomings are, and you must admit where the strengths are. Don't ever be
Yes.
counterproductive.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that then gets very individualized.
Mm-hmm.
But that's how practice gets better.
Absolutely.
Surround you with people who want to tell you the truth rather than tell you what you want to hear.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So that person can say to you, that was the greatest session I've ever seen to date.
Mm-hmm.
And you know they're being honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
Or, you know, it wasn't real strong. What you did was not structured very well, and the sequence was off, and the clients had a hard time following you.
Mm-hmm.
You can trust that person
Mm-hmm.
to have told you the truth, and for you to think it through and figure out a better way. And you can.
Mm-hmm.
You can.
Yes. Oh, thank you.
Well, I think that's all I've got.
I have a couple left. We'll see. There's so much wisdom. I am listening and soaking it in. We've already talked a little bit about some of the ways that you care for yourself. Are there any other of your favorite self-care practices that you wanted to share that you haven't had a chance to?
You know, I did this this keynote for the Midwest Regional last spring, and there was a quote that I really liked. It was from a 6-year-old. She said, "Sometimes you just got to take a nap and get over it." So I have found that to kind of be true.
Mm-hmm.
And so around here, what I'm leading to here is quiet time that everybody needs during the day. And I love to read. I read a lot. Right now I'm reading the memoirs of Ulysses S. Grant, and he is a phenomenal person. So I make time every afternoon to get alone and read. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I take a little snooze, but most of the time I don't. I just really love that time to read. I think being comfortable being alone is critical. Mm-hmm. If you can't be quiet by yourself, if you can't entertain yourself, life is going to be very hard. Mm-hmm. But it's really impossible to make that somebody else's responsibility. And frankly, it puts too much pressure on a relationship to give somebody else that responsibility. And so you have to learn to stand on your own 2 feet. I learned it the hard way, but I learned everything the hard way. I used to say to the students, well, I don't know why it is, but I have this temperament that I just have to once in a while stand up in a hammock. And it's not ever a very good experience, because it's impossible. So if you can somehow not put yourself in a situation where you have to do it your way so much that you have to stand up in a hammock and try to balance yourself, if you can somehow find your way through being you, what do you like? What do you not like? What do you like to do? What do you not like to do? If you change yourself for somebody to make a relationship work, you will never be happy. And when the relationship ends, you'll be
Mm-hmm.
lost.
Mm-hmm.
You won't even know what favorite food you have.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing I learned is, did we talk about networking? I
Not
mean,
yet. Go for
one
it.
of the therapists said to me, one of the best things you can do is to network with friends.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, she said, women friends.
Mm-hmm.
She said, you need to network with women friends. And I thought about this a little bit this morning. And I don't know what advice we give to gentlemen. I think maybe network with one another. But men have different conversations than women do. And you can work through the things that trouble your heart when you talk about them. When you hear them said out loud, it
Mm-hmm.
really has to be a defined statement in order for you to get a thought to even make the statement. So then you've defined the problem. Is that making
Mm-hmm.
sense?
Yes.
You have a feeling, you don't know how to talk about the feeling, but once you can put it into words, then you can identify it, and then you can begin to do something with it. And sometimes you need to do that with somebody listening. But if you have to do that to a lot, sometimes you have to do that a lot, rather.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have just one friend, it will just wear her slick. She
Mm-hmm.
can't cope with that. You've told her this thing 7 times and she already gets it, but you still need to talk about it. So you got to
Mm-hmm.
get a bunch of these gals and you need to have individual conversations until you can get whatever it is out of your craw.
Yeah.
Now that's kind of far afield there. I don't know if I even answered your question, but it, the whole thing is network with women friends,
Mm-hmm.
and it's hard. I never did network with people I worked with. I worked with people I worked with and had very nice
Ah.
relationships with them.
Mm-hmm.
And here's another thing I think for students to understand. Do not plan on making your work colleagues your close friends.
Mm.
Because again, it puts too much pressure on work and it can compromise you. And never, never, never date somebody you work with. Just don't do it. It's a recipe for disaster. When you break up, you got to go to work and see that person every
Yeah.
day. If you should break up. If you don't break up and you continue to see one another, you've got a problem because other people get really uncomfortable about how you're really in close relationship in a romantic way with somebody that they have to work with too.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not a good thing. At Child Center in St. Louis, where I worked in child psych, we had a policy that if you dated somebody that was on the job, you had to have one of you quit.
Mm-hmm.
It was a very good policy.
Mm-hmm.
It just took all that. So if you dated in secret, sooner or later, I mean, in that place, it didn't stay secret too long because people just pick up on things like that. But the
Mm-hmm.
whole point of it is that you just can't have a productive. I know somebody's saying, well, that's impossible. Sure, you can have a productive situation, but not really.
Oh, thank you, Alicia. Are there any other words of wisdom from you or anyone else that you'd like to leave us with today?
Well, as soon as we quit, I'm sure I'll think of something. I think the word of wisdom is that students are the future of music therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, each and every one of you is a very valuable asset. And you might be in formation, maybe at the beginning of your formation, but you're still very important.
Mm-hmm.
And there are people in the business who are clearly understanding that and clearly very receptive to the idea of trying to work with you. I mean, you have to do it within reason because everybody's busy, but understand that you are joining a community of professionals that
Mm-hmm.
is amazing in every way. They're amazing people, they're good people, they're talented people, they're skillful people, they're successful people, and you're part of it, and it's just really hugely wonderful.
Mm. Yes, absolutely. Which of those amazing, wonderful voices in music therapy would you like to amplify and give a shout out to today?
Oh, I thought about that a lot, but I couldn't think of how to identify one. There are really so many. There are
Mm-hmm.
so many. And if I was to give a shout out, I I don't know who I would choose. I mean, honestly, I
Yeah.
don't, because there's so many wonderful people. So I think maybe my shout out goes to the students.
Mm. Yeah.
Give yourself a chance. Be good to yourself. Pat yourself in the back when it's appropriate. Change when it's appropriate. Know that there's always somebody who will be willing to talk to you. And understand that there are those of us who've been in this field for a very long time. I would do it all over again. In fact, I'm
Mm.
really pretty jealous because things are so much better established now. And
Yes.
in so many things are so much easier now.
Mm-hmm.
They're still going to be challenging, but at least you don't have to fight, well, what is music therapy? Because really, most people know.
Much more than they did.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
50 years
Barbara?
ago or 30 years ago. Yes.
Let's
Mm-hmm.
just have the shout out to the students that it's a huge responsibility, but it's an extremely rewarding thing and it could be fabulous. Now, if you're not suited for it, the responsible thing to do is to step aside and still appreciate it and
Mm-hmm.
still understand that you are a part of it in a way and that you can still advocate.
Yes, we can always advocate, regardless of where our
Absolutely.
position is. Yes. And Alicia also wanted us to point out all the resources, including resources on advocacy, that are available from AMTA at
That's right.
musictherapy.org. So if you aren't familiar with those, down the road, there will be a new website that's easier to navigate coming, no worries. And in the meantime, I will tell you all the search bar works great. And I use the search bar at musictherapy.org all the time. It is really helpful.
Yes.
Thank you again, Alicia, for joining us today. And thank you to all of you listeners as well. If you haven't already done so, please make sure to subscribe to this MT Mentor podcast today so that you don't miss an episode. And if you want to dive deeper into some of these practices, you can also learn about and join our private membership group at joyfulnoises.llc.com/MT-mentor. That's joyfulnoisesllc.com/MT-mentor. All music therapy students and professionals are welcome, and equity-based pricing is available. Subscribe to this free MT Mentor podcast and join our membership group today. MT Mentor, let's fill our cups and share our wisdom together.